Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Nancy Kachingira. For the first time since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is visiting Germany. In the last hour, he was greeted by the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, with whom he is now holding talks. Germany has just announced its biggest sum of military aid to Ukraine yet, $3 billion. That's about £2.4 billion. Well, earlier, Mr Zelensky was received by President Frank-Walter Steinmeier. The trip comes just a day after a visit to Italy, where he met the Italian Prime Minister, the President and the Pope. Let's cross to our correspondent Jenny Hill in Berlin. Jenny, thank you for joining us. Germany is definitely pulling out all the stops for President Zelensky on this visit.
Yes, indeed it is. First of all, from the formalities and ceremonial perspective, he's had the full military honours at the Chancellery, as you've said. He also met the German President early this morning, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. And while he was there, Mr Zelensky thanked the German people, describing Germany as a true friend and a reliable ally. He's now holding talks with the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, and streets around here are closed off. There are snipers on the rooftops, special police forces going up and down the river behind me here. Security, as you'd expect, extremely tight. Mr Zelensky, as he arrived overnight, actually had his plane escorted by 2 German Air Force fighter jets. So that's the formalities, the ceremony. But then Germany is also really pulling out the stops, as you put it, in terms of what it's now offering Mr Zelensky, and what a welcome gift. 2.7 billion euros worth of weapons, including tanks and anti-aircraft systems. That approximately doubles what Germany had given so far in terms of military aid, to give you an idea of the size of that package. And that is something which will no doubt have gone down very well with Mr Zelensky as he's talking with Olaf Scholz at the moment. We expect those talks to conclude in the next 10 minutes or so. It'll be very interesting to hear what they had to say to each other. We're not quite sure how much we'll hear about that, of course, but we hope we'll be able to bring you a little bit more about that later on.
And what's behind the way that Germany's support for Ukraine is evolving? Because in the past, there has been some reluctance. There was some backlash from other Western countries, for instance, when Germany was hesitant to provide Ukraine with its Leopard tanks. But now we're seeing, a $3 billion military package.
Yeah, I mean, if we'd had this conversation just over a year ago, neither of us would have believed that Germany would be sending weapons into an active conflict zone. That went against every principle in post-war modern Germany. And this country really has evolved during the course of this conflict, from being very hesitant about what kind of support it was prepared to send. At first it was ridiculed actually for sending helmets to the Ukrainian army. Then all the way through a debate about whether or not it should be sending battle tanks. Germany extremely reticent, always at the back of those, saying they really didn't want to commit those kind of troops. Now there's a debate about fighter jets, of course. Germany among the NATO members who doesn't think that that's a good idea at the moment. One of the arguments being they're concerned about supplying Ukraine with the kind of weaponry that means it could, in effect, attack Russia on Russian soil, although Ukraine has vehemently denied any suggestion that it would want to do that. These will be the kind of discussions going on in the Chancellery between Mr Zelensky and Olaf Scholz, of course. But, it's very interesting when you look at that meeting early this morning with the German President, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. A lot has changed in the last year. You might remember, actually, that Kyiv initially made it very clear to the German President, who was planning a trip to the city, that he wasn't welcome there. And that was in part because of Germany's rather hesitant stance over weapon deliveries, but also because of Germany's previous involvement when it came to trying to resolve some of that conflict, the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine. Frank-Walter Steinmeier is formerly the foreign minister of Germany. He was one of the architects of those Minsk agreements. Remember those, the attempts by France and Germany to get Ukraine and Russia to sit down and try to come to some kind of ceasefire ceasefire, if not a longer-lasting agreement to stop the conflict in eastern Ukraine. That seems like a very long time ago, of course, now. It appears to be water under the bridge between Mr Zelensky and Mr Steinmeier, who was initially accused perhaps of having rather too pro-Russian a stance. That's all changed. We don't know a great deal of what was said between the two men. Perhaps we'll hear a bit more about that later on, but it certainly gives you an idea of just how much has shifted in this country and within that relationship over the last year or so.
All right, thank you very much, Jenny, for that bit of context. And just to let our viewers know, what you're seeing on the screen next to me is what we're expecting to be a press conference there from President Zelensky and the German leaders that he's been meeting. So we'll keep an eye on that and, of course, bring you any lines that come out of that. As we have been saying, President Zelensky is in Germany meeting with Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and we'll have all the latest for you as it comes in.